Should they stay or should they go? We all know that the Bengals should re-sign Trey Hendrickson, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins to long-term deals, but what should they do with key veterans on their roster? It's time to break down every cut candidate right now on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Hi again, everyone, and welcome into CBT. I'm James Rapien of BengalsTalk.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join the 53,000 plus subscribers we have on YouTube. And we're growing and growing and growing, so much so that you can also check us out on audio, whether it's Apple, whether it's Spotify. Please, 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 even if you subscribe on YouTube, support and follow on your favorite audio platform. Today's video brought to you by BetUS. Let's dive into this because we know what the Bengals should do with their stars, whether it's T, Jamar, or Trey. And we've covered that in depth on this channel. But what guys should they move on from to clear cap space, to open up cap space, to improve their roster in pursuit of that Lombardi trophy? It's so interesting. We covered the cap earlier this week where the cap is much higher than expected. You look at overthecap.com and they're projected to have around $53 million in cap space when the cap is officially set for 2025. But they can pretty easily get to $90 million in cap space. And the way they do that is by cutting guys or moving on from guys that I think a lot of you have kind of expected them to move on from. The one that is a clear-cut candidate, a guy that's, who knows where he is right now, but Sheldon Rankins. They're cutting Sheldon Rankins. If they do that, when they do that, not if. A $9.6 million cap savings. Boom. Easy, done. I could write that story right now. I could record that instant reaction video right now. That will happen. Guaranteed, 100%. The Bengals are cutting Sheldon Rankins. And so you clear $9.6 million in cap space. That's a lot of money to play with. Now suddenly that cap goes up to $63 million. And then Alex Cappa, another guy that they're likely going to cut. And it's a bummer because I thought Cappa in 2022, his first year with the Bengals, was the best lineman they had. And I was like, man, they bring in that offseason, they bring in Orlando Brown Jr. And it's like, you got Ted, you have Cappa, you have Orlando Brown Jr. Like you could see it coming together, but he got nicked up at the end of 2022, didn't play in that AFC Championship game, and hasn't really been the same since. And so that's why he's on this list. Really like Alex. I think he's one of those dudes, honestly, you're looking for. You want a little more athleticism, I would say, in general. But if you could find the next Alex Cappa, and if Cappa would have just avoided injury, maybe he sees the final year of his contract. But he's not going to. They're going to save $8 million there. And so just with those two guys that Rankins didn't contribute at all, Cappa clearly was a weak spot on the offensive line. You move on from those guys, you clear $18 million in cap space. That's a ton of room to play with. And there are other guys. And that's what I think is interesting is, and I'm going to get into them, is not only do the Bengals have cap space, cash, all the above to handle business when it comes to that area of their stars and adding, but they can move on from guys that you would just kind of expect them to move on from, to give them even more maneuverability, give them even more flexibility, even more resources to throw at this free agent class that isn't considered a top-tier free agent class, but I think they can find some upgrades. And another one of those spots is Sam Hubbard, $9.5 million. The Bengals, Sam Hubbard, I think it makes sense. You have to cut him. I know some have said restructure. A restructure doesn't make sense. Sorry, it doesn't. Now, you could cut him and then bring him back on a much lesser deal. That makes sense. It makes sense because you're talking about a guy who probably should kick inside more than he does, doesn't give you pass rush juice, is good against the run at this stage of his career, and should be versatile enough to give you some snaps. So if he's a rotational piece at $2.5 million per, you bake in some incentives, I could see that. But saving $9.5 million, you have to do it. And so just there, and I have other candidates to get to, but with Hubbard, Rankins, and Cappa, 9.6, 9.5, and $8 million in cap savings. You do the math there. $27+ million in cap savings, just like that. I have other cut candidates I want to get to. We will do that coming up next. Today's video is brought to you by BetUS. Make sure you get in on the action today with BetUS, because they have all the latest odds, props that you're looking for. And here's why I love BetUS, because they have the fastest payouts in the industry. They have a full casino if you're into casino, but I got to be honest, you got to stay around the sports book for me. And whether it's NBA, whether it's future bets on Major League Baseball, maybe you want to look at the NFL future bets. You can get in on all of the fun. And right now with code YouTube150, you'll get a 150% bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. Again, that's code YouTube150 on your first deposit up to $2,000 for that 150% bonus. Don't delay. Check out BetUS today at BetUS.com, code YouTube150. So let's just say the Bengals cut Rankins and Hubbard and Kappa. They clear up another $27 million in cap space. Boom, just like that, you get to 80. But that's not it. I think that Jermaine Pratt, obviously he's requested a trade. He's someone that they're either going to cut or trade and clear $5.6 to $5.8, depending on where you look at the projections, $1 million in cap space. Over the cap has it at 5.8. I've seen 5.6. Regardless, over $5.5 million in cap space. Even more there. So now you're at $85 million in cap space. And then another one, and this is a guy I like, in a signing I understood. And unfortunately, he suffered the neck injury last year, but Zach Moss. It's a running back rich draft. I think that there will be running backs available in free agency if you want to go that route. That is a position of need for the Bengals, but you can save $3.3 million against the cap. Zach Moss coming off of the injury makes a lot of sense to move on from him as well. So if you do all of that, Moss, Pratt, Kappa, Hubbard, Rankins, you're at $89 million. $89 million. Plenty of cap space to go around. And that's even before you look at some guys like a Geno Stone. If you want to cut him, you can save $6.5 million there. Cordell Volson, $3.5 million. Isaiah Thomas, $1 million. All of these guys that are legitimate cut candidates. And Isaiah Thomas, I mean, it's just $1 million. If you don't think he's going to make the roster, boom, you could do that. He could also be an ideal camp body for you. I'm not saying that, but the point is the point here. The Bengals can move on from guys that you kind of expect them to move on from. Just kind of do basic stuff. This isn't restructuring Joe Burrow. This isn't tweaking things and going to a crazy level. This isn't. It's not rocket science for cap space. It's very simple, basic stuff. And I expect them to do these moves. I think the one that's interesting is Hubbard, and not from a will they cut him? Like he's already gone in my mind from a his current contract perspective. Now, that might be a, hey, we're going to cut you. We want to keep you in Cincinnati. I know he wants to be in Cincinnati, of course. And there's the right number. He's still a good rotational piece, but that's at like 10 to 12 snaps per game, probably at like $2.5 million per year. It's just he's at a different phase of his career, different level. You think about like a rotational piece like Cam Sample was before his injury last year. That's where Sam Hubbard is. And I stole that from Charlie Goldsmith, and I think it's a really good part of it. It's like Sam Hubbard has entered his Cam Sample era. It's not a bad thing. It's just where he is, and that's okay. And so is there a role for him? I think so, but it's got to be right for the team. And $9.5 million is certainly not right for the team, not with what their dreams, goals should be. If you do that, you can sign the big three. You can go after Milton Williams. You could go after Osa from Dallas. You could go after Josh Sweat if you wanted to. I mean, the Bengals have the resources to keep Mike Gesicki, for example, or keep BJ Hill, and then keep the big three and also add pieces. And that's what this video is. These are obvious cuts, obvious moves. It doesn't mean they need to make them now, by the way. A lot of moves happen in March. The Bengals did sign Ryan Rico to a 2-year extension. He was an exclusive rights free agent. This is similar to what Jake Browning was last year. So the Bengals punter back. Congrats to Ryan. We knew he would be back. Exclusive rights free agent, sticking around in Cincinnati for the next 2 seasons. Make sure that you check out BengalsTalk.com. As always, today's video brought to you by BetUS. We have a ton coming your way. Yes, the NFL Combine is next week. Also, the Bengals, they could make some trades. There are guys that they could trade to clear up even more cap space, get another asset in return for some of these guys. We will have a video breaking down trade candidates. And no, it's not just Jermaine Pratt. And no, I don't mean T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson. Legitimate trade candidates that I think are realistic. We'll have a video and podcast coming up about that as well. Early next week before the Combine. Until then, for Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening and watching to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Do you buy or sell the idea that Joe Burrow realistically could ask for a trade at some point in the future?
There's some Palmer era trauma creeping back up, and I sympathize with that. But don't forget how many people said Burrow wouldn't even accept being drafted by the Bengals in 2020. You want to be on that side of things this time? Be my guest. I'm not buying that at all. If that were to ever happen, there are very serious problems with this front office, with this organization.